Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is part 2 of my July readathon wrap up. So in this part 2 wrap up, it's going to be the remaining 8 books that I fulfilled for the last remaining 8 prompts of the readathon. If you have not checked out part 1, what are you doing? Go watch that for this to make even more sense. I will link part 1 down in the description box down below. So let's jump right into it. We left off at number 8 for part 1. Continuing, prompt number 9 is read a book that has a rebellious teenager. Now for this one, I chose Nigeria Jones by E.B. Zoboy. This one I gave 4 stars, and this was a new release that I was anticipating, and it is a genre that I don't read a lot of, so I did want to include that on this list. This is kind of similar along the same veins of The Project that I read for an earlier prompt. This is a cult-based story. In this one, we are following our main character, Nigeria. She is growing up as the daughter of this cult leader. The cult is called the Movement. What they represent is called the Movement. It is basically a black separatist group. Separatist, is that how you pronounce that? A group set out of Philadelphia. Kind of reminiscent of like the Black Panthers. Now, her mother kind of just disappears. You don't have any information on that when diving into this. You just know that she is not there anymore, that she is suddenly gone, she disappears. And Nigeria starts taking on her mother's role in this community, in this movement. Realizing the secrets that her mother kept and the life that her mother really wanted for her. And that includes going to school, because in the movement, your life is the movement, right? So it's your job, it's your work. They created their own school as well. I'll get into that in a second of like the details surrounding that. But her mother, she finds out that her mother wanted her to go to school outside of their little commune. It was a Quaker school, which holds importance. It's the first time she ends up getting there, okay? I'll just say that. She ends up getting there, and it is the first time that she's ever experienced, one, being around white people, and it's her first time experiencing like the realization of how brainwashed she is and the narrative that has been her life since her birth. Coming to the realization of all these things and realizing that she can't even have a conversation without being racist, or without race and history of it all coming out in conversation. She doesn't know how to converse without it being about anything that's separate from how she was raised. And that is the entire, like that was her entire life. You know, they're not allowed to study anything else. They can't talk about anything else. Everything is based around the history of their people and the racism and white people and the oppression. They cannot go outside any of that. They cannot take a break from it. And they will welcome in and bring in a lot of kids in from just families that are just, you know, abusive families, you know, kids that are falling off to the wayside and going to crime, you know. So there's a lot of things that are really good, and there's a lot of things that are really bad. She is realizing at some point that she wants to make her own decisions and have a change and kind of take a different direction for her life. She finds out things that she never knew of before, all these secrets about her mother. You know, again, it is just another psychological, manipulative situation that is written very well. And I learned things that I did not know of in terms of history. Haitian culture, I did not know a lot about. I knew about some of the aspects of practices in voodoo, but I did not know about like Haitian Independence Day. There's a lot of that in this book. Different chapters are kind of titled like that. Reading from like speeches from Malcolm X. Yeah, I just learned a lot about things I didn't know of before in terms of the history and where certain things came from, which was really enlightening. And I am going to say also that this was hard to get through in some parts in terms of I have empathic qualities. So the entire time I am feeling what our main character Nigeria is going through. I'm feeling what she's feeling and the things that she's listening to, and her father, her relationship with her father, and her feelings. And and that's the important part, especially with stories like this, is to understand what someone from a different culture, a different race, a different background is going through that's opposite of you. I could feel everything that she was feeling, and I could see everything that was happening and understand why and how it was happening, and the motives and intentions behind our characters and why they were the way they were and what they were doing. And if you were growing up like that and hearing these things and like what the things that it would do, I absolutely felt it, and I understood all of it. Like different parts of Africa and Haiti were mentioned a lot, and I really learned some things that I never knew of before. So I really liked that. The only reason I did not give this 5 stars, because I gave this a 4 to 4.5 stars, is because there were things about how the movement worked I did not understand. Like, I guess it's a non-profit. Like, that's how these things work, is that it becomes like a non-profit. But her father, our cult leader, he's supposedly a writer, which really, he has all these books that he's written. He's driving like an Escalade, and you know how they do things. They have their own schooling system, or they created their own like homeschooling system, but yet at the same time with the school, it's not like homeschooling. With homeschooling, you have to, like, you're still involved with the state. Like, you have to submit everything that you do. Like, you follow a curriculum and it submits to the state. So the kids are recognized as being in the system, right? But with this, nothing was like legally done. So the kids, like, they're not in the system. They're just being schooled at home and in the library and in the schooling that he wants them to do in his own curriculum, or that the movement created. Also, I didn't understand how the finances work. Like I said, he's driving this really expensive vehicle, and he's a big author of these books that he has written, and he's a podcaster, and he's on social media, but that doesn't provide enough money to drive a vehicle like this. And the living situation that they were in was like a commune. Everyone is living together because they're bringing in people. If someone needs to be rescued out of a bad place, like, they will take anybody in on condition that you study everything that they study, you follow their rules, do what they say. Everything is thrifted. All their clothes are thrifted. They make things, and that's one way they make money, is they make like homemade stuff and they sell them. But again, it wasn't that part. I want to understand more how cult-based things kind of support themselves. And like I said, I don't know if they can get it to be a non-profit. I don't understand how non-profits work either really all that well, so that might be why I'm having a hard time. But all in all, I really like the story. I would highly recommend it. 4.5 stars. All right, prompt number 10 was read a book with an element from the periodic table. For this one, I read Touch of Gold by Annie Sullivan. This is a YA fantasy. This was a 2-star read. This was a dud. This was an absolute dud for me. This was a King Midas retelling. I really wanted a King Midas retelling. I have not read one yet. And because this was a YA, I was like, I'm feeling it, and I really like the premise. After King Midas's gift or curse almost killed his daughter, he relinquished the touch forever. 10 years later, Princess Cora still bears the consequences of her father's wish. Her skin shines golden, rumors follow her everywhere she goes, and she harbors secret powers that are getting harder to hide. So yeah, King Midas retelling. I was just bored. I was bored throughout the story. Again, a situation where the premise sounds so much better than the actual execution, unfortunately. But yeah, I was just bored with this one. Prompt number 11 was read a book that is already on your TBR. For this, I chose Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. This one I gave 4.5 stars to, 4.5 stars. Then, she was 15, her mother's golden girl, she had her whole life ahead of her, and then in the blink of an eye, Ellie was gone. Now, it's been 10 years since Ellie disappeared, but Laurel has never given up hope of finding her daughter. And then one day a charming and charismatic stranger called Floyd walks into a cafe and sweeps Laurel off her feet. Before too long, she's staying the night at his house and being introduced to his 9-year-old daughter. Poppy is precocious and pretty, and meeting her completely takes Laurel's breath away. Why? Because Poppy is the spitting image of Ellie when she was that age. And now all those unanswered questions that have haunted Laurel come flooding back. What happened to Ellie? Where did she go? Who still has secrets to hide? ... Why does this girl resemble Ellie at that age? So this is a mystery, obviously, and I was anticipating this. This was my second Lisa Jewell book, and I heard that this one was one of the best ones that she has written. I gave it 4.5 stars. I clearly enjoyed this story. This has some tragic, dark elements in this book. What happens is tragic, and I was really intrigued by the storyline. I thought the characters were really fleshed out. I thought the pacing was fantastic. It's a psychological suspense mystery type of read. The only reason I did not give this 5 stars was because the ending, I wish, had one thing added to it. I also needed a little more detailed explanation on one thing in particular, and that one thing is a really big thing. I couldn't understand why that wasn't like touched upon more. It's so shocking. Like, it really needed to be talked about more. One page, like, and it wasn't. It just wasn't. The mystery, the suspense element to it was really well done. 4.5 stars. I highly recommend this one if you're in the mood for more darker, tragic mystery, because it's dark and tragic, not gonna lie. Prompt number 12 was read a book that you need to apologize for not reading yet. For this, I chose 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This I chose for this prompt because I've had this on my TBR, or I had this on my TBR for such a long time, and every time I pick it up I get like a few pages into the first chapter, and I would just put it down, and I would become distracted with other stories, and I would just like not commit to it. And this brought me to the realization that I cannot read, or I am not into stories that are surrounding Asian mythology. I can't really explain why. It's just not my thing. I was intrigued by our main character in this because she is forced to be voiceless. I mentioned it before, but this is a YA fantasy Asian mythology inspired. And our main character is cursed, and her brothers are turned into cranes, hence the title 6 Crimson Cranes. And if she uses her voice to speak, one of her brothers will die. She's voiceless. She is now rendered mute. Nothing else really intrigued me about this. Just our main character and the position she was put in was the only thing that just got me, but the storyline, the mythological aspects to this, just wasn't into. So 2 stars. Prompt number 13 was read a book that has an ignorant character. For this one, I chose Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This was a 3 to 3.5 star for me. I enjoyed the premise of the story. I enjoyed the storyline and what they did. This is a YA fantasy, book 1 in a series. The storyline was different from a lot of like arranged marriage, political alliance fantasies that you read out there. This had a different twist and take on it. Basically, our main character, Princess, she is, you know, arranged to be married to secure an alliance, and of course she doesn't want that, so she runs away with her cousin to a village to create another life for herself. When 2 strangers arrive, 2 handsome men arrive, and one is an assassin and one is the jilted prince that she ran away from. Now, she had never met this prince before. We've seen each other and never actually spoken to each other, because I think she had written him letters and he never like wrote her back for reasons I can't remember. So there's not even like any type of familiarity in language between the 2. So she was ignorant because she had no idea who they were and which, like, and as the reader though, so as the reader, as you're going through this, you now have to guess who's the assassin and who's the prince, because you don't know which one is who. And I will say that I was correct. I just have to say that I was correct. I was happy about that. If I had one really good thing, it was that. The reason this was like 3.5 stars for me is because there were parts of this that I had to fast forward over because they were kind of triggering to me for a specific reason. And the first half of this book, it's too, how am I gonna say this? The pacing was not quick enough for me. But the second half of this book, it's like the writing seemed to change because the plot changes. And when the plot changes, it makes it seem like the writing changed and the pace changed. And it was too romance heavy in the first half, which I think is one of the biggest problems I have with this book. Like, I'm not a big romance reader, and the first half of this book was like, it's all it would talk about, really. And then the second half got more into the plot and the action. And once that happened, I was more interested. So if the book was less romancy-y and more of the action and plot driven with the fleshed out character development that happened, then I would have been happy. But it wasn't, so 3.5 stars. Prompt number 14 was read a book that has loneliness or isolation. For this one, I chose These Silent Woods by Kimmy Grant. I loved this book. Y'all, this was a 5-star read for me. Finally, yes, 5 stars. Loved it. My favorite book of this readathon, this one right here. Really, this story takes place in the wilderness. It is very atmospheric. Writing was so good. Let me give you a little snippet of the premise. No electricity, no family, no connection to the outside world. For 8 years, Cooper and his young daughter Finch have lived in isolation in a remote cabin in the northern Appalachian woods. And that's exactly the way Cooper wants it, because he's got a lot to hide. Finch has been raised on the books filling the cabin's shelves and the beautiful but brutal code of life in the wilderness. But she's starting to push back against the sheltered life Cooper has created for her, and he's still haunted by the painful truth of what it took to get them there. The only people who know that they exist are a mysterious local hermit named Scotland and Cooper's old friend Jake, who visits each winter to bring them food and supplies. But this year, Jake doesn't show up, setting off an irreversible chain of events that reveals just how precarious their situation really is. Suddenly, the boundaries of their safe haven have blurred. ... I'm not going to read any more of the premise, but we are in the point of views of both of our characters, a father and daughter, and the writing of this fantastic because it captures the emotions of all of our characters. Our two characters, it really captures just the relationship, the emotions of Finch and what she's dealing with growing up like this and like pushing back and wanting to, you know, kind of explore and kind of break free a little bit. And when all these other chain of events start happening to kind of throw a wrench in the situation, things ensue. It's phenomenal. The writing captures everything. There was nothing, I clearly gave this 5 stars. There was nothing about this that I didn't like because of the atmosphere and the writing. There was one thing at the end for the ending that I was like, but I needed a little bit more clarification. But you know, I love the atmosphere, the story itself, and the writing so much that that little thing didn't drop my star rating as opposed to something else it would have. But this one I really enjoyed. I loved it. 5 stars. If you are in the mood for a mystery, and well, this isn't, I mean, it's kind of this is not really a mystery. What is this? This is just like a wilderness story that has some suspense. It's not a thriller. It's not a big mystery. There's like a mysterious element surrounding him, our main character, our father, in this, but it's not like a huge mystery. But if you're in the mood for that kind of setting, I highly recommend you pick this up. Next, her prompt number 15 was read a book that you would normally read in spooky season. For this one, I read Lone Women by Victor LaValle. This was a 3-star read for me, which was a disappointment because this was a highly anticipated new release. It just fell flat. Let me tell you why. Let's talk about it. This is considered a thriller horror novel. And I'm gonna say this is thriller with soft horror elements. There are some parts in this that were graphic, but it's not a lot. It's only a few parts. And I highly recommend the audio of this if you do want to jump into this one. The narrator for this audio was really good. It was really well done. She did a fantastic job. We are following our main character, Adelaide Henry. She carries an enormous steamer trunk with her wherever she goes. It's locked at all times because when the trunk opens, people around Adelaide start to disappear. It is set in the year 1915. She's forced to flee California to make her way to Montana as a homesteader. Dragging the trunk with her at every stop, she will become one of the lone women taking advantage of the government's offer of free land for those who can tame it. And the secret she's tried so desperately to lock away might be the only thing that will help her survive the harsh territory. So I learned a couple things when I read this book. First off, so this is, I forgot to mention as well, clearly it's like a historical fiction on top of it. So it's like a sci-fi. I'm not gonna call this a fantasy. To me, this was sci-fi elements. It's more of a, I don't know, SFF, okay? SFF, sci-fi, fantasy, thriller slash horror slash historical fiction mashup of all those genres. I learned about the Montana homesteading law during this time. I had no idea about this. And there was an article that was read in the story from that time period, which was really interesting to listen to. I really loved the first half of this book. The first half really built up the suspense and this mystery of the steamer trunk, because as I said before, when I talked about this in a previous video, in my TBR video, I was like, I have never been so damn intrigued by a steamer trunk in my life. What I need to know. Because there are so many possibilities this author could have went with that kind of storyline. And it was not where I wanted it to go. The second half of this book was just not good for me. It fell flat. I did not like what ended up happening in the trunk, about the trunk. the secrets. There were things that were not clarified and completely not understood at all. And I know that that can be a thing in sci-fi, but this needed to be explained, and it wasn't. It wasn't, and I did not like it. It didn't make any sense. With that being said, it gets a 3 stars only because of the first half of this book. That's the only reason I'm giving it 3 stars. Great first half, just not a solid second half at all. Last prompt, last book completed for this readathon was, the prompt was read a book from one of the enemy team captain's favorites list. So all of us as team captains created a top 10 favorites list. It's a list of our top 10 favorite books. And I read, for this one, Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Now this was a favorite that was off of Ian's favorite list. Now Dark Matter is like a sci-fi suspense slash thriller, psychological thriller type story. We are following our main character, Jason Dezen. Jason Dezen is walking home through the chilly Chicago streets one night, looking forward to a quiet evening in front of the fireplace with his wife Daniela and their son Charlie, when his reality shatters. Are you happy with your life? Those are the last words Jason hears before the masked abductor knocks him unconscious. Before he awakens to find himself strapped to a gurney surrounded by strangers in hazmat suits. Before a man Jason's never met smiles down at him and says, "Welcome back, my friend." In this world he's woken up to, Jason's life is not the one that he knows. His wife is not his wife. His son was never born. And Jason is not an ordinary college physics professor, but a celebrated genius who has achieved something remarkable and something impossible. Is it this world or the other that's the dream? This was really good. I gave this, what did I give this? I think I gave this 4.5 stars. It was like 4 to 4.5 stars. I did not give this a full 5 stars because I was confused. I can't say why because of spoilers, but what ended up happening was confusing to me because this particular theme in, or this particular type of sci-fi, because like I mentioned before, there are several different themes with sci-fi, and the one in this book, how it ended up happening at the end, what it ended up really being, it was kind of like a little plot twist that he chose to do. I didn't really 100% understand that plot twist, so that is why I didn't get a 5 star. The pacing and the action of this story was great. The action was really well done. So good. I mean, that kind of makes this book, and that's what makes this book a really quick read. So if you do pick this up, it's kind of like addictive in that way, where it's just because the pacing is so fast and it's so great because the action's great with the pacing. They're just like, But there was also another thing I didn't like about this. There's a section or a part in the story where he is in a hospital, and it's completely unrealistic to how real world hospitals operate and work. I just have to say that because it's like a pet peeve of mine when I see how TV and books, like media, really can like not desensitize, but can kind of get people, giving people a false idea of how it all actually works. So when that part came up in this book, I was like, no, that is not how a real world hospital actually operates. It's like very convenient to the story, not realistic. Okay, so those were all of my 16 books that I read for the readathon. Part 1 and part 2 to equal 16. Obviously part 2, this was my remaining 8 for my wrap up. Now I'm also going to include something else. I was also taking part in the Keymark, one of the discords that I'm in, the SFBO, the SPIFBO readathon that they were doing over there, and I didn't realize that I was even a part of it until I was a part of it. So it actually worked out because there were 5 prompts for the readathon that you could choose, and in the first week of doing my Battle of the Decades readathon, the books that I had completed already in the first week actually fit 4 of the prompts, so I could submit and complete 4 of the prompts right off the bat. So I'm gonna go over those prompts now. For the Key Mark Readathon prompts, prompt number 1 was weekend beach read, 200 to 350 pages. For that, I read Lone Woman. I included Lone Woman for that prompt. Prompt number 2 was Dairy Queen, a book with a female protagonist. For that, I chose Kiss of Deception. Prompt number 3 was Rucksack Trekking. Cover includes a weapon. For that, I chose Young Elites to fit that prompt. Prompt number 4, Sandcastles. Read a book with a cover with castles or a fortress on the front. For that one, obviously The Witcher. Prompt number 5 was Take a Dip in the Ocean, which was a novella that has no page minimum. Now for this one, I chose to read Warm Up by V.E. Schwab. I gave this 5 stars. This was a super short novella, okay? We're talking like 20 pages or less. I'm pretty sure it was not more than 20 pages. I did not know about this. If I would have known about this, I would have read this, because this is the prequel. This is and for the readathon as well, you get extra points if you read a prequel. So I did get extra points for this one. This is the prequel to Vicious. I did not know about this, and I wish I did, because I would recommend reading this before reading Vicious, because it adds to the suspense. It like creates even more of a like excitement to jump into the story. It's been 297 days since David died and came back. He may have survived the avalanche, but the aftermath has been far worse. His wife moved out, taking his son with her, and a devastated David hasn't left his house since, terrified of the mysterious new power that followed him home from the ill-fated expedition. After months in seclusion, David's ready for a fresh start and ventures out, determined to keep his power in check. But David's power isn't the one he needs to worry about. ... And the guy who shows up at the end is one of our main characters in Vicious, in our story. So this one was really good. I highly recommend it. It's like, how can something be that short and be 5-star? I didn't know either, but this one was. All right, y'all, that was my part 2 of my July Battle of the Decades Readathon wrap up. Comment down below if you have read any of the books that I have read for any of these prompts, and if you did take part in the readathon, what was your favorite book that you had read for the entire readathon, and which one of the prompts that I went through in this video was your favorite, or your favorite book that you read for that prompt. I would love to know. If you like this video, give me that thumbs up and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my new upcoming bookish content. And as always, happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.